Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is going to die of heat today. It happens more than earthquakes, floods, and hurricanes combined. We have satellites, hospitals, and air conditioning, and heat still wins. So here's a question that should bother you a lot more than it does. How did a civilization with none of that, no fridges, no fans, no four drips, put several million people in the hottest, driest place on the planet, and keep them alive for 3,000 years? It's noon in Thebes, 1350 BCE. It's 43 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit for the Americans watching. The sand under your feet is hot enough to fry an egg. You're wearing a linen kilt. You're about to do hard manual labor, and refrigeration won't exist for another 3,000 years. And you're completely fine, not gritting your teeth and enduring it fine. Tuesday, fine. You'll do this again tomorrow and the day after, and you'll probably live to 60, which for the ancient world is basically winning the lottery. We look at ancient Egypt and see pyramids, gold masks, and a teenage king's face on a museum poster. What we never see is the boring, brutal engineering problem sitting underneath all of it. How do you keep a civilization alive in one of the deadliest climates on Earth, using nothing but mud, linen, and beer? Because that's the real achievement here. Anyone can stack rocks into a triangle if they've got enough time and enough backs to break. Keeping those backs alive long enough to finish the job. That's the part nobody talks about. So today we're going through all of it. The architecture, the clothing, the beer, the salt, the wind catchers, the shaved heads. And by the end, you're going to walk away with a genuinely uncomfortable thought. The Egyptians solved this problem so well that we've spent the last century solving it worse, just with better technology. Let's go. Here's the misconception baked into the question itself. We picture Egyptians enduring the heat, white-knuckling their way through it, surviving the desert like it was an enemy at the gates. That's backwards. Egyptians didn't survive the desert. They lived in a narrow green ribbon beside it, and they'd spent millennia engineering that ribbon so precisely that heat stopped being a threat and became just another design constraint, like gravity or the width of a doorway. Every part of daily life, house shape, clothing fabric, work schedule, what you drank, when you ate, which way your bed faced, have been quietly tuned to solve one specific problem. And to understand how, we have to talk about the least glamorous topic in Egyptology, sweat. You're, biologically speaking, a walking evaporation machine. Your body has exactly one serious cooling system, and it runs on water. Get hot, push water through your skin, let it evaporate, and the heat leaves with it. That's the entire mechanism. Dogs pant. Elephants use their ears as radiators. Pigs wallow in mud because they can barely sweat at all. Humans have somewhere between 2 and 4 million sweat glands. We are, without exaggeration, the best sweaters in the animal kingdom. Here's the catch. The system runs on a consumable, and that consumable is you. A laborer working outdoors in an Egyptian summer can lose several liters of water a day. Lose 2% of your body weight in fluid, and your brain function measurably drops. Lose 5%, and you're in real danger. Lose 10%, and you're dying, confused, because one of the first things heat steals from you is your ability to notice anything is wrong at all. There's a second consumable people forget. Sweat isn't distilled water, it's salty. Push hard enough for long enough, and you can drink every drop of water on Earth and still collapse because you've flushed out the sodium your nervous system depends on. That's hyponatremia. It kills you just as dead as dehydration does, just slower and meaner. So the entire survival equation in ancient Egypt reduces to 3 moves. Reduce heat load, replace water, replace salt. Everything else is commentary. Start with the house, because this is where Egyptian engineering gets quietly brilliant. Egyptian homes were built from mud brick, Nile silt mixed with chopped straw, packed into molds, and baked hard in the very sun it was designed to defeat. There's a nice irony in that. Mud brick has a property modern construction has spent decades trying to reclaim: enormous thermal mass. Here's what that means in practice. A thick mud brick wall doesn't block heat. It delays it. Sun bakes the wall all day, and the heat crawls through the material at a crawl, 10 to 12 hours to make the full journey inward, which means the punishing heat of the afternoon finally arrives inside your house around midnight, right when the desert night has turned cold and you actually want it. And the chill of the night arrives at midday, exactly when you're desperate for relief. The wall isn't insulation. It's a time machine for temperature, taking a daily swing that can hit 20 degrees Celsius between noon and dawn and flipping it completely out of phase with what you need. Then they stack more tricks on top of that. Windows, small, set high near the ceiling because hot air rises and the exit needs to be at the top. Whitewash, walls coated in bright limestone wash, reflecting up to 80% of incoming solar radiation straight back into the sky. Street layout. In worker settlements like Deir el Medina, streets were built deliberately narrow, so buildings shaded each other all day long. Egyptian roofs were flat and doubled as the household's real living space after dark. A huge share of the population simply moved their beds onto the roof for the summer, where open air circulated freely and body heat radiated straight out into a cloudless night sky. Sleeping on the roof wasn't a mark of poverty. It was the penthouse suite. Now here's where it gets genuinely clever. Egyptian houses had a device called a Malqaf, a wind catcher. You can see them in tomb paintings, including the tomb of Nebuchadnezzar from around 1300 BCE. The Malqaf was a hooded vent mounted on the roof, angled to face straight into the prevailing wind, which in Egypt blows reliably out of the north. Wind hits the scoop, funnels down a shaft, and drops directly into the central living room below. Meanwhile, hot air rises and escapes through high windows on the opposite wall. You've just built a continuous pressure differential, a horizontal chimney running on zero power forever for free. And they didn't stop there. Porous clay water jars, zir, were placed directly in the path of that incoming air. Water seeps continuously through the unglazed clay and beads on the outer surface. Dry air blows across the damp jar. The water evaporates, and evaporation pulls latent heat out of the air along with it, dropping its temperature by several degrees on the spot. That's an evaporative cooler. That's a swamp cooler. That is mechanically the exact same device sitting in the box at your hardware store right now. And they built it out of clay pot and a hole in the roof. Let's talk about clothes, because your instinct in extreme heat is to strip down. The Egyptian answer was smarter than that. Egyptian clothing was almost universally linen, woven from flax. And linen happens to have a stack of properties perfectly suited to extreme dry heat. Hollow fibers, extraordinarily breathable, letting air move straight through to the skin. Moisture wicking, pulls sweat off the body and spreads it across a wide surface for fast evaporation. Low insulation, unlike wool or dense cotton, it traps almost no heat against you. A loose, light-colored linen robe creates a shaded microclimate right over your skin, blocking direct solar radiation while still letting convection carry your sweat away. Going fully naked in the desert sun isn't cooling. It's a speed run to a second-degree burn. What about hair? Egyptians, men, women, children, famously shave their heads. That solved two problems in one move. Lice, which thrived in thick hair, and heat. But for formal occasions or a day outdoors, wealthier Egyptians wore wigs made of human hair or plant fiber mounted on netted mesh. The wig sat slightly raised above the scalp, creating a thin, insulating air gap while shielding bare skin from direct sun. It wasn't vanity. It was removable head protection with good hair day energy. Add daily applications of scented fats and oils, plus dark galena, eye makeup, kohl, to cut down blinding desert glare. And you've got a complete, functional personal protective suit. 3,000 years before SPF. Rule 2. Replace the water. You need several liters of fluid a day, and the Nile is right there, but drinking straight from it was a dangerous gamble. The river carried silt, parasites, animal waste, and schistosomiasis, a debilitating parasitic infection modern researchers have confirmed in dozens of Egyptian mummies. So what did Egyptians drink instead? Beer. Enormous, civilization-scale, structurally essential quantities of beer. This wasn't a modern IPA. Egyptian beer was thick, hazy, low alcohol, somewhere around 1 to 3% ABV. brewed from fermented emmer wheat or barley. Call it half drink, half meal, loaded with yeast, B vitamins, protein, and carbohydrates. And critically, the brewing process boiled the mash and fermented the liquid, which killed off the bacteria and parasites that made river water dangerous in the first place. Beer wasn't a vice. It was the safe water supply. How important was it? It was currency. Workers at Deir el Medina were paid in daily rations of grain, bread, and jars of beer. When those rations arrived late under Ramesses III, around 1155 BCE, the workers walked off the job at the royal necropolis, the first recorded labor strike in human history. Not over wages, over the beer. In a 40 degrees Celsius climate, cutting the beer ration wasn't stinginess. It was switching off the workforce's hydration system. Rule 3. Replace the salt. The standard Egyptian diet handled this without anyone needing to think about it. Staples included heavily salted dried fish, coarse mineral-rich bread, onions, garlic, and potassium-loaded dates. No electrolyte tablets, no sports drinks, just salted fish, dates, and thick fermented beer, delivering exactly the chemical balance a body needs to survive hard labor in extreme heat. Final move. Don't be outside when the sun is actively trying to kill you. The Egyptian workday was built entirely around solar reality. Heavy construction and field labor started before dawn in the cool morning air. Between roughly 11:30 a.m. and 3 p.m., the danger window, work simply stopped. Workers retreated to shaded mud brick shelters or stone huts near the site to eat, rest, and sleep before returning to lighter tasks as the sun dropped in the late afternoon. Even massive state construction followed seasonal logic. Pyramid and temple building peaked during Ake, the annual Nile flood, when farmland was underwater anyway. Farmers couldn't farm, so they became laborers instead, and the high water made hauling multi-ton stone blocks by boat dramatically easier. The calendar, the workday, the entire social structure, all of it bent around the river and the sun, not the other way around. Here's the real takeaway. We started this video treating the desert like the enemy Egyptians had to survive. But ancient Egypt didn't survive in spite of the desert. It existed because of it. Egyptians called the fertile riverbanks Kemet, the Black Land. They called the desert around it Deshret, the Red Land. That red land was an impenetrable wall. For 3,000 years, while civilizations across Mesopotamia were repeatedly invaded and conquered across open plains, Egypt sat protected on both sides by hundreds of miles of waterless, lethal sand. The heat was their moat. And that same brutal, bone-dry heat is the only reason we know any of this today. Humidity rots wood, dissolves papyrus, and decays cloth. The Egyptian desert's punishing dryness is what preserved the papyri, the painted tombs, the linen garments, the human tissue, for thousands of years in near-perfect condition. The heat didn't just get survived. It got recruited. It guarded their borders, dried their dead, and preserved their entire history for us to dig up thousands of years later. So next time you step outside on a brutal summer day and sprint for your car to blast the AC, think about the worker in Thebes in 1350 BCE. No electricity, no ice, no fans. Just mud walls, linen, a roof for a bedroom, and a cold jar of beer waiting at sunset. Let me know in the comments. Could you survive a summer in ancient Egypt? Until next time, thanks for watching.